Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back to the show. We are honored to have Dr. Grant Venerable joining us here again. It's been quite a few months. I've gotten to know this gentleman, an amazing, my goodness, doctor, professor, artist, chemist, writer. There's a lot to you. Your memoirs, I've been learning a lot about him, his whole life travels, and he recently moved, and I'm excited to see that you're in another new space right now. Are you getting settled in?
I am. Yeah, I'm in a new space.
Beautiful. Well, it looks great. And how's California life treating you, Grant?
Well, it's starting to treat me better. The confusion is disappearing, and order and organization are taking over, and that pleases me very much. And I think those are the main things people are dealing with these days is order and organization.
Yeah.
Because there's so much out there that I'd like to chat a little bit about is how to minimize confusion, because it's waiting to sneak up on us at every opportunity. So I'm here in my little cabin in the desert, the high desert, and what that really means is that around Southern California, the low desert is around sea level, but the high desert can come in about 1,500 to 2,000 feet above sea level. And so I am in a place called Yucca Valley, which is about 2,000 feet elevation, and it's above the Palm Springs area. Palm Springs, Indio, and that's about sea level. And it's right along Interstate 10, which starts in Florida, Georgia, and comes all the way into Santa Monica Beach, California. So that's what's going on. The construction is just about complete on the cabin, the cottage, whatever it's called, the shed. And there's just things to unpack now. I just need to get boxes in here that have been in storage and unpack them so I can use their content. What I want to get into is really a backup. It's a support base. It's a scaffolding from which to talk. And that scaffolding really is defined by my book, my memoir, and everything I have enjoyed and triumphed with in my life and run into challenges about. They're all in that book. It's called that's another book. It's called
There's so many.
Footprints. Footprints in the Chaotic Unknown.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great title for a book.
It is.
It's basically saying that anything worthwhile in this life starts in chaos.
Yeah.
We are born in chaos. We may not articulate that when we're
like
still
it every
in the
day.
womb, but it's all around us. And it just means that our brains haven't had time to create the order that's really there. Last time I touched base on I think something called what we call ontology in philosophy and science. Onto is like being from the Greek word, and ontology is the study of what is, what exists. I think probably 95% of our challenges and problems and disappointments would vanish if we could validate what exists and what does not exist, because we spend much too much time on some things or some ones who do not really exist. I've touched on that, so I'm going to touch on it again.
Sure.
I want to start with a base of why we do science. How does science come about? Can you still see me there, Jill?
Yep, I see you. I see you.
Okay, because let me make sure I get this back.
Sure.
Because sometimes I just touch my computer and I
And
lose
it
my
goes all
screen.
wacky, right? Uh-huh.
Now where is this screen now? Well, let me try. Because I wanted to get up another screen that I wanted to talk about. Let's see, where is that? Here it is. I think this is it. There was an interview with Scott Galloway. He comes on, oh, I don't know how often, but once every couple of weeks.
Hmm.
And so what he's saying, can you still hear me,
Yep.
Jill?
I hear you loud and clear.
Great. Scott Galloway, in one of his latest posts here, come on, Scott, where are you? See, that's it. Huh. I think he's on another screen here.
Yeah, I don't see him.
There he
Are you
is.
trying to share your screen or?
Scott Galloway says skills like computer science and Mandarin are no longer relevant. Here's what kids need.
Okay.
And so that's what I'm gonna follow through on if I can get to it here. Because that gets down to education. With the
Yeah.
AI boom well underway, tech giants are competing for users to see who can advance the quickest, and the data centers that are being built to support all our AI inquiries are eating up the world's RAM
Mm-hmm.
at a breakneck pace. That's RAM memory, which is the how the computer operates. And for recent graduates, the AI boom may also be impacting their ability to get a job or begin their careers. So he says a survey from ZipRecruiter found that 47% of recent grads believe AI has already had an impact on hiring in their field, according to
Mm-hmm.
Forbes. Meanwhile, Futurism reports that an anonymous New York financier recently told the Financial Times that new hires who are considered to be AI natives are actually turning out to have surprisingly shallow ideas. So much so that the firm he works for is avoiding AI literate grads while focusing its candidate efforts on humanities
Mm-hmm.
grads instead. Now, I marched down that road a little way back because that was certainly becoming the case when I was in Silicon Valley industry in the 1980s. And I had mentioned, Jill, how I had really gotten in without a bit of computer skills. Well, that's not exactly true. I knew how to do handheld calculators and I knew how to use electronic typewriters, but I wasn't the expert uh, PC user. But that changed. What companies were starting to look for were employees who were gifted in the arts and humanities.
Yeah.
Sounded strange, but I began to talk about that in speeches that I was giving all over the country in the mid 1980s into the 1990s, that what those talents were providing industry was more than just hard collectible skills and tech knowledge, because it's the arts and humanities that give fluidity to the knowledge. That
Yeah.
means the whole brain gets involved in the effort. And the companies were finding out they were hiring computer experts from computer science majors whose brains were not very fluid. In
Okay.
other words, there wasn't much creativity there
Mm-hmm.
to see how different components of a system could be put together in different ways to provide a superior performance and a superior product. And many of the current day CEOs are beginning to say that again,
Yeah.
like Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, offering his point of view that AI won't ruin your career dreams, but rather a new industry is being born.
Yeah.
A new era of science and discovery is beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what Huang is saying of NVIDIA.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me reach back. Um, Someone like Steve Jobs,
Oh yeah.
and dear Steve has gone on to the great computer laboratory in the sky. Um, there's and then of course Bill Gates is still on the scene. Um, no one has entered the world, according to Wong, with more powerful tools or greater opportunities. This is what he's saying to 5,800 graduates at Carnegie Mellon University just in the last week. We're standing at the same starting line. This is your moment to help shape what comes next. So run, don't walk. Wang's words were encouraging, and there's little doubt that some young people will see success in their early careers and life's work because of AI and technological
Mm-hmm.
advances.
Yeah.
Uh, Part of the message that Scott Galloway shared in a recent appearance on the Diary of a CEO is uh, Galloway and podcast host Stephen Bartlett discussed how parents can AI proof their children's futures. And the former shared two main skills
Mm-hmm.
he thinks will help kids succeed. And I
Okay.
like what Scott Galloway says here.
Mm-hmm.
Why a college degree isn't enough to save new grads from unemployment. Let me see, let me get down this list.
Sure.
Um, 10 years ago, private schools were focused on teaching kids Mandarin and computer science for future success. How's that worked out? Said Galloway. Thank God my kids know Mandarin, said nobody right now. Galloway refers to storytelling as the most enduring
Yeah.
skill, describing
Mm-hmm.
what he means as your ability to look at data, create a narrative arc, and then communicate that story in a compelling way. And that's really what I did when I visited a certain vice president of one of the companies in 1982, 83, was I had a story to tell. And I spun it around an idea called the structure of the whole. In my usage of it, it was called the Venn matrix of a system, in
Okay.
which I had developed an organizing tool to help companies do systems analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, that's a method of listing
Okay.
all the functioning elements of your computer system or your biological system or your chemical system. Well, I'd learned how to do that by teaching chemistry for so many years and dealing with the chemical elements, but not just chemical elements, but all of the elements of the mental system that students are working on. And I used to start with a poem at the start of class
Yeah.
to start to develop the narrative, the story that Galloway is talking about. So I talk about Pocket Full of Seeds, Edna St. Vincent Millay. And what are these seeds? Well,
Yeah.
seeds are what they are. We always knew them to be. We plant them in the soil, we plant them in the earth, we nurture them with water, with nutrients, so that those seeds grow. I could think of no better story to tell my students than that. Namely, they themselves are seeds of the future terrain that we're developing.
Mm-hmm.
I'd pick a different author, every other class meeting. And I know the first day I did that,
Yeah.
students started looking in their course schedules to see if they were in the right room. because this professor's spouting poetry. I came to a chemistry class and he's talking poetry. And then I said, well, no, you're in the right place. This is Dr. Grant D. Venerable II, also called Dr. V. And I like to start with poetry. So Galloway goes on, he describes a second critical skill as the ability to establish strong relationships with other sentient beings. Notice he didn't just say people,
Yeah.
he said sentient beings. They could be your kitty or your doggy, your guinea pig, your bird, or just
Oh,
tortoises that you meet out in the desert or a lizard, and develop a sentient a relationship with that creature.
yeah.
He argues, that is, Galloway argues that when we build relationships in real life and not just online, it can help drive success. A strong network, human network, can be a huge asset that can help young workers with finding the right roles or growth opportunities. Relationships can also help young workers with starting a business, speaking to potential customers, and driving both personal and professional growth. So, given that, I want to get on. Let's see. Here's one more skill for good measure. A third skill, especially for young men, are struggling with rejection, is hugely underrated. I think that's really no secret anymore in American society. The ability to endure rejection, he said. Galloway recommends giving young people as many opportunities as possible to try to build a friendship or a relationship and hear no, which would force them to learn how to deal with no and move on from no. Drawing from his own experience, Galloway says the secret to his success is rejection. Imagine that. And I think many, many great people have said that. I know the president of Morehouse had said that if you're not failing every time you do something, if you're not experiencing any failure or rejection, your education isn't working. You have to get out there and experience a few good, healthy rejections or failures, because that makes you come back and double down on finding, well, what works that avoids rejection and brings about success. So I probably had maybe several hundred rejections, failures in my existence, and each one has led to finding a success that was much larger than the thing I was attempting to do. I just spoke to a former student of mine earlier today on the telephone in Florida about that. And it was what got me steamed up to do the podcast today. And that had to do with one of the ingredients in dealing with rejection or no is the development of intuitive thinking, the intuitional, that part of the brain. In right-handed people, that would be the right cerebral hemisphere. The intuitional is what you can't see with the physical senses. It has to do with that which is creative, that which is what you're inventing to do something better. But it also touches the utmost of religiosity. Now, I didn't exactly say religion, but that's where religiosity starts, with an
Never heard
understanding
of that word,
of
but
what
religiosity. Got it. Interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
understanding what religion really teaches us. And that's the whole idea of the invisible. And originally, the ancients knew there was something invisible there beyond their physical senses, they couldn't see it, they couldn't hear it, except maybe in a storm. And that would be the voice of this invisible energy. But this nameless, that they called it, is the center of the religiosity in human existence. And that, of course, became the centerpiece of religion. Now, here's the little leap that Dr. V takes, Dr. Grant Venerable speaking, is that religiosity is the organizing principle of our lives, everything that we do or want to do. But how did the ancients discover it? Well, in the Western world, we knew it best in ancient Judaism. And then when Christianity came along as a seed element of Judaism, and then when Islam came along as a seed of both those, the Judaism and the Christianity, and then we have what we learned from the Eastern civilizations, what we learned from the Zoroastrian believers, the Buddhist believers, the Hindu believers, the Shinto believers, and everything else that are operating on this principle of religiosity, this invisible organizing principle, which took me years to come to grasp with. And it took the form of what I call Venerable's matrix, or just plain Venerable matrix, or for short, the Venn matrix. Now, that's not the same thing as the Venn diagram, but it's related. There's a relationship there, but they're not quite the same thing. But the Venn matrix actually organizes the basic functional elements of all living organisms, any living organism. They all share the same 5 principles. And it touches on what Scott Galloway likes to go around talking about. Well, why not? He used to go to UCLA. I went to UCLA, and they talked about such things there. But the centerpiece of the Venn matrix has no physical description. It's an empty circle in a much larger circle in the form of a tetrahedron. And what's a tetrahedron? It's a geometric figure on a base of 3 corners to it. And then there's a 4th piece that's up above that plane, that triangular plane. And it forms, if you connect all the edges together, you have a 3-sided pyramid. And right in the center of that pyramid is the 5th piece. And that's what the ancients, in their religiosity, called the 5th element, obviously. And it gives us the word quintessence. The quintessence of anything is what gives the religiosity to anything that you're dealing with, whether it's with religion or science or mathematics or business or computers or industry or government, all that. So let me run down the other 4 elements of the Venn matrix. I call them domains, DOMAIN, domain for short. And the domain E isn't for excellence, it's for identity. The identity element. It's at the center, this pyramid with 4 sides. And that is what holds the whole pyramid together as a system. So then what's the next piece of the pyramid? That's the piece that's called, is it B? No, it's A. A is the purpose element, of the pyramid. And the purpose is what the pyramid is about achieving. That's what it achieves, its purpose. Then there's a third element called C. C for whatever you want to use C for, certainty, carbon, whatever you like. But C is all of the linkages in your system, everything that holds it together, that lets it, all the elements communicate with each other. So if you have, oh, there's another one, B, element B. That is all the physical stuff, the things that you can see or hear with your physical senses or touch with your fingers. And that is in the domain B. So that is just one more domain in the Venn matrix, and that is the change and balance domain, domain D. Now, these are all not original with me, was what they're based on, the properties of life. And life is a self-generative process. In other words, you eat food and you generate energy. It's also let's see, it's a self. It's everything starts with self. It's a self-monitoring process, so that life, a living organism, can keep testing itself, looking at itself, being aware of itself, knowing what it needs. Then there is this change domain, D, the change and balance domain. That is a property of life, where life is constantly seeking to balance itself. That's a word we refer to as equilibrium. When we eat food, then the body has to always keep that material in balance in our bodies. So we don't eat too much. We don't eat any of the wrong things. We eat the right things. So I'll see if I can name these. But anyway, a living organism is self-generating. It can create more of who it is. It's also self-maintaining. That means it is self-repairing. If it has an imbalance, like an illness, or if it falls on the floor or on the sidewalk and it gets a wound. So that's self-maintaining. But it also, a living organism, has a self-identity. And it's that self-identity that keeps all the other four domains operating in accordance to what or who that identity is. And beyond that, everything that Galloway and others are talking about are based upon those 5 domains of the Venn matrix. That's what I carried into high-tech industry, and a number of people working in different companies, was to base your systems analysis on those 5 domains. Only you map your company onto the domains. So you ask, okay, which parts of your company have to do with producing a product that performs a purpose? Then what parts of your company hold all of the physical material elements, raw materials that you need to produce your product or service? Then your company has to have balance. And so you have departments whose job is to make sure everything is running in balance properly. Who are those departments? There have to be people in charge of those departments. Then there has to be a department that is constantly using the communication domain, that not only looks at the present, it looks at the past. It looks through channels to the past. It looks through channels to the future and unifies those all in the present time. And there's people in departments whose role that is to perform those functions. Those are called strategic planners, strategists. They may not be the largest element of the company, but they may well be the most important part of the company. But they work with that E in the center domain, uh, that gives the religiosity, the unifying nature to the company. And all of what the company is and what it does has to follow the pattern of that unifying principle. So why don't we all take a deep breath right there while I switch and see if I can find this domain I was looking for. Well, okay, I did find one here, and that was with Scott Galloway. But I want to look at some of the other news feeds in here. I'm just thumbing through here some of what I see on the screen. Now, I'm not seeing all of what I want to see, but I think I'll find one. There's an article here, a news feed on Wallace Simpson, who became the wife of the Duke who was to inherit the monarchy and become the King of England. Well, this is an article on Wallace Simpson on the British monarchy's stability. So that's just an interesting article. Oh, this is an interesting article. It's on Los Angeles. It's the head of LA school district resigned after the FBI raided his home and office. Well, I'm not going to go into that, but I had not seen that news item yet, but I knew there were things brewing and had to be worked out. Let's see what article comes up next. Let's see. There was an article about the mystery blonde in Trump's cryptic great daughter post finally identified. Well, that's very interesting. I don't know what all that's about, but interesting. And here's one related to what Scott Galloway was talking about, was men feeling lonely and rejected. This is an article on men with very few friends and hardly any visitors at home often have these 6 unique traits, and they talk about that. Well, it's something many of us scholar types talk about because it's a very important topic. And it is also addressed by the Venn matrix. When the Venn matrix, when you map a human being on the Venn matrix structure, it talks about that phenomenon of rejection and loneliness. And when you do it on males, you get the information on men. When you do it on females, it comes up with information about women in the society, something we all deal with because we have families comprised of males and females and friendship groups comprised of that. So, Jill, have you put out the phone number lately?
Nope. 631-707. Excuse me, 631. What am I talking about? 307. That was my personal number. 4010-631-307-4010. The lines are open. Of course, anyone can call in with any questions for our grant, Venerable. And by the way, just to let you know, you are on Amazon, right? And people can find your book. It's Genesis from Chaos. I was looking at it earlier.
Yes. So
Volume
footprints
2,
in the
there's
chaotic.
Act 2, Footprints in the Chaotic Unknown, Art, Science, Oracles, Kinfolk Book 2. That's the
Right.
second one.
Now,
Go ahead.
so, and don't expect it to be read like a novel, although parts of it do read like a novel
Yeah.
because they touch very interesting personal
Mm-hmm.
facets of my existence.
Yep.
But now you can take that book and ask yourself some questions about your own life as a reader or a listener here. And something I just touched on maybe in the last couple of podcasts that I realized is really uh, puzzling a lot of people. And there's a lot of podcasters on there speculating about
Mm-hmm.
that. The question is,
Don't they all? Yeah.
does POTUS 47 exist?
Mm. Explain that one.
And it hit me one day as a scientist who was so deeply trained in scientific method, which came down from the rabbinical councils, not as a scientific method, but as an analytic method for studying the truth of the scriptures that were written down on papyruses in the desert on scrolls, and they came down to us and became part of our Western world scriptural texts. So we know what the ancient rabbis were thinking, and they were following their inner voices in getting this thinking down on the papyruses. And they began to describe a religiosity in with many names it turned out. An almighty, a creator, a God, things like that, a Yahweh, an Elohim. But what is that? How do we know as rabbis that it exists? And what they developed was a method for finding, validating the existence of something you cannot see, hear, or touch. And you certainly can't smell it or taste it. So then what do? Well, all students of the sciences have had to deal with, particularly in the natural sciences, the physical sciences, the mathematical sciences. You're dealing with something that had never existed before, and you have to validate that it exists. Such, my friends, was the whole purpose of my graduate education, picking up the tools to get ready for that at undergrad at UCLA, and then mastering the tools at the University of Chicago for 4.5 years of graduate study. My subject for study was different than most of my classmates because I had different tools. Well, several of my classmates were into theoretical chemistry, so they didn't have instruments. They weren't using instruments as such in a direct way to observe the little invisibles they were dealing with. But I had a huge laboratory at my disposal, and it was the first, or maybe the first, I think it was the first, along with Columbia University and the University of Chicago. These were the first national laboratories that were actually funded and maintained by the federal government, without which none of us would probably be here today because of their vital roles. So I was looking at chemical molecules in the inorganic molecule field of cobalt with cyanide groups bonded to the central cobalt atom and bombarding them in water with high energy radiation called electron beams. And it produced interesting molecules that would only last for maybe a few millionths of a second, which I had to identify. as part of my research project. Well, there's ways to do that. You use the field of spectroscopy because you're passing ultraviolet light, visible light, through the reaction vessel that you're using. And because of what happens to the light, how it absorbs, how it gets light absorbed out of its light beam, that I can actually determine what's in there and what its structure is. So I was utilizing a process that the ancient rabbis used, except it was dedicated to physical chemical substances. That was a whole discipline on its own. I not only went to the University of Chicago to study physical chemistry, chemical physics, and various other fields like thermodynamics, statistical mechanics. I was going there to learn this method that came out of the Talmud, that was developed by rabbis over a 2,000, 3,000, 3,500 year period, that I was using to tap into the mysteries of science. Now, it took me well along into my lifespan to realize that was the main thing I learned in graduate school. Yes, I was learning about these particular chemicals. Yes, I was learning how to determine what they were through their molecular spectra. And yes, I was learning how to use the laboratory to synthesize these chemicals. But it was a thing you cannot see with your physical senses that I was really learning, was a technique of how to reason to determine something is there when there's no there that's readily apparent. And that's now one of the most powerful methodologies among human mortals. And it's taken up in the great laboratories of the world today. So hold on to that. But that's what I utilized to ask the question, when it hit me, what I had learned in graduate school. Does this president, POTUS 47, really exist? And I built up to that because I could answer with a definitive yes when I was asked, or you could ask the press and they say, yes, President Dwight D. Eisenhower actually exists. And that was in the 1950s, after his inauguration in 1953. And Eisenhower was brought to Los Angeles in a parade that came right through my neighborhood on Adams Boulevard, Los Angeles. And there he was standing, waving his hat at the thousands of people standing along the parade route. And nobody there could deny they had seen President Eisenhower and could say they knew he existed. And it's the job of the press, if the press is doing its job, to testify truthfully the president exists. The next president I knew existed was John F. Kennedy, because I saw him at his nomination acceptance speech in the Los Angeles Coliseum. They didn't have any open air limousines after the tragic assassination of President Kennedy. So then how do we know? You can't see the president except looking inside of the darkened windows of the limousine. You don't know unless you have a valid, robust press function in your country that can assure you and give you valid affirmation that that person exists. That's the only way you would know. And what hit me was, I have no way of knowing, because of what's happened in this nation in the last, I'd say, 5 to 10 years, when the whole journalistic technology effort project has been turned upside down. Yes, there's people out there that should know, that are credentialed to know truth. How much are they being influenced by now the major billionaires who own the companies whose job it is to talk journalistic truth to the public and attest to the public? And it's an unfortunate thing for me as a scholar who needs that kind of input to say, I'm afraid I cannot really say I know that POTUS 47 even exists because of all of the what is put out there. The AI is in charge of that area of life. And if you believe everything AI succeeds, yeah, I guess you would think that the POTUS exists. And yet I don't know. And I'm not saying he doesn't exist. I'm just saying, as a scholar of the physical sciences, mathematics, and philosophy, I don't have the means to know in a way where I can say with 99.99% certainty that the POTUS exists, which I feel is a serious issue in this society that has to be repaired. Do I know how to do it? I don't know. But I think if we start working on the Venn matrix of the system, we can make a huge step forward in that direction. And I think we can learn what's there. With that, I'm going to ask Jill if she wants to wrap up with any other questions or statements.
No, I don't want to wrap up anything because we still have plenty of more time to chat. We still have, well, 8 more minutes, so I'm hoping someone gives us a call, 631-307-4010. But now you're just a man of many, many, I don't know how I would describe you, with your work as a doctor, with your background, with your culture, with all that you've come to know and do as an artist, as a chemist, and as a writer now. It's just um, you continue to push barriers, boundaries, and you don't have any hopes in like retiring and stopping, right? You are just going to keep going and working. And I know you moved recently, right? So you're in California though still, but
That's right.
you know, tell me what is going to be next for you. I mean, because are you just going to
Um,
continue writing, working, researching? I mean, most people like say, "Oh, I want to slow down, I want to travel," and you're just so you have such
well,
an amazing work ethic and a brain that continues
I'm
to
going to
put.
use this little cabin in the desert to work on a master Venn matrix
Mm-hmm.
of what I can rely on what I do hear and see on my computer screen or my TV screen to do a Venn matrix analysis of what I am detecting. And that analysis will end
Yeah.
up enabling me to tie everything together in an integrated, unified form where I can actually adduce what is existent and what is not existent. And I believe I can do that now.
Well, I hope
There's
you.
economists out there
Mm-hmm.
that understand that kind of challenge and question. And I want to tie together their knowledge in answering this question of existence.
Yeah.
What exists? Who exists? How do they exist? Or are they proxies and actors on an imaginary stage? So I think, Jill, you got the point here. And um, I'd like to see what the temperature is out there today, because um, let's see what it is. Yeah. Well, now it's 96 degrees.
Oh my gosh.
But by 2 o'clock, I know it's going to be at 101. So it's going to be a little hotter today than yesterday.
Mm. Well,
And back of that is a whole story of history
yeah.
because the rabbis did their intuitive work of learning the scriptures on desert environments, whether it was in China or India, East, or Africa or the Americas. There's something about the desert environment that causes the brain to work in an intuitive way, and it causes the still small voice to start speaking as it did to the desert fathers and mothers of thousands of years ago, and still
Mm-hmm.
speaks to us of those who will listen. But so, yeah, when I'm not working, I'm listening. I'm talking to friends who like to encourage listening.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of friends, do we have any friends that are calling in today? Hello, hello. 631-307-4010. Grant Venerable, and no callers yet. But we dealt with
And if they
that.
want to email a
Perfect.
question,
Go ahead.
use VENTWO at AOL.com. And in the message line, put podcast question. Or there's my website, grantvenerablephd.com, all lowercase.
And don't forget, they could pick up all your books. You have a total of 3 of them right now, right?
It's actually 4
It's a
ebooks out there.
trilogy. I've seen
And,
the 3 on Amazon, but there's another one.
and there's a fourth one
Yep.
that is really about the religiosity factor
Mm-hmm.
in existence. And it really winds up where it begins with my beginning from my mother's womb.
Yeah.
And and there's so much debate now. I even saw some today online about people, uh, harping about religion and in the sense, well, they're talking about the beginning and the end.
Yeah.
And there's always argument because people have all kinds of different beliefs. And I have beliefs, but I keep testing them to make sure that they're still working and serving me in my life.
Yep.
And I know that they're serving me when, if I have a challenge,
Yeah.
I meet up, I'm actually able to address and solve the challenge. Even when I had got a clue as to how I was going to do it initially, but I have to make myself open to the still small voice.
Well, thank you always for being here. The Honorable Dr. Grant Venerable. Excited he's here. As always, like you mentioned, email him. You can always call in, leave a message for him, and go to Amazon. Purchase some of the books, the ebooks, people. Get started because
Yeah,
you know what? It's fascinating
yeah,
to
it's
read. Again, Footprints
yeah.
in the Chaotic Unknown. Or just Google his name, you'll find them. That's Grant Venerable the Second, Venerable, correct?
Hey, say that again, Joe.
Sure, Venerable.
Oh, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't put in my hearing aid.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. I'm like, I'm just reading it from my sheet. I hope your name's right. I've been saying your name this way for years. All right. Well, thank
Yes,
you so much,
yeah,
sweetheart. You have a fantastic
okay,
day, and we'll talk hopefully soon. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your day and your new space. God bless. Bye bye. Stay cool. Stay
okay,
indoors,
okay.
especially if you're out in the
Thank you,
desert like
Jill.
this guy.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Thank you.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.